It's Tuesday and my patrons voted, so this time we're going to be doing top 10 monsters from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 that I want to see in 5th edition. I guess really that's just monsters from previous editions because they may have been in editions prior to 3.5, but that's where I started and the books that I'm familiar with, all of these ones here. So if you want to see what my top 10 are, stay tuned. Here, there be dragons. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and just to get you rules right off the bat, one, this has to be a monster that is an official creature that was published in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Can't be any kind of homebrew or anything like that. I'm also not going to do like any of the, well, I really thought that this monster was better in 3.5, so I'm going to give you that as an option here, right? You've all heard my thoughts on what I thought dragons were in 3.5, and they were much better and more deadly and like a big fight. I'm not going to put like, well, dragons is a type because I don't like them in 5th edition. They have to be a creature that does not exist in 5th edition, which actually is significantly harder with the release of more and more books and one-shots and things like that. But I do have a list of 10, and I guess we'll just roll right into it. Number 10. Number 10 is the Shocker Lizard. I don't know why, but I always really like these creatures whenever I flipped through the original monster manual for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. They're nothing crazy. You could see mushrooms around this creature, right? They're a small-sized creature. They live in, warm marsh areas. And they're only a challenge rating 2, so they weren't anything super crazy. But one thing I do want to point out, which I'll do this on the first one, and then I'll kind of glance over it going forward, was just the stuff we used to get in 3.5 in the monster manual. So first you had this little flavor text to describe the creature. This little lizard is about the size of a terrier. It has a bullet-shaped head sporting a large pair of horns that sweep back from the sides like spiky ears. A similar structure appears on the tip of its tail. So like you could read that to your players to give them a description of what they're seeing. Then it'll give you a little bit here in the middle about the creature themselves. It'll tell you how it works in combat, what it does to like, is it aggressive? Does it fight or not? How does that work? Also, other things we had up here was the environment that it lived in, whether they came in solitary pairs or things like that. And then again, treasure and coinage, because every time you killed something in 3.5, you got some degree of treasure, coins, magic items, depending on what they were. And then, you could obviously, there was rules here if you wanted to advance them and make them stronger as well, increasing their hit dice. But basically what they were is a tiny little lizard that, as the name implies, could send out electric shocks. So by themselves, they weren't very dangerous. They could do non-lethal damage, which isn't really a thing we have in 5th edition. But it was 2d8 points of non-lethal damage. But what was interesting was when they paired up together, 2 of them together could deliver a lethal shock, which would be a 20-foot radius attack that did 2d8 points of lightning damage for each lizard. So if you had like a whole horde of these things, it would be like a big old burst of energy as they're all charging up together. They could also detect any electrical discharges within 100 feet, and they were good at swimming, jumping, and climbing. And yeah, I just really liked them. I think there was one of the improved familiar feats allowed you to get them as a familiar, potentially. They were immune to lightning damage as well. Yeah, I don't know. I just really liked them. I thought they were cute and cool, and I always kind of wanted to have one as a pet. And I think they're right to put them in 5th edition, so we'll get on that, wizards. Number 9. Number 9 is the Ethereal Marauder. Again, this is another one that I don't have any great real reason as to why I put this on the list, other than the fact that it's a creature I always thought was really cool. It really reminds me of Shriekers from Tremors 2 and the Tremors series, so that might be part of why I really like them. But, I'll read you the little description here. This creature resembles a bipedal lizard with a sinuous tail. Its most disturbing feature is its lack of a head. Instead, it is a gaping maw surrounded by 3 powerful mandibles. Gleaming jet black teeth line the inner mouth. 3 small eyes ring the maw, interspersed with the mandibles. So this creature was really interesting. It could travel the ethereal plane and kind of shift in and out at will, and that was sort of its thing. It would kind of move around and then try to catch you by unawares by shifting back to the material plane and then biting you. But even then, its bite wasn't anything too crazy. It wasn't like a super crazy powerful creature. It had, okay hit points, and the fact that it could retreat back to the material or the ethereal plane easily enough, and there were specific rules about trying to deal with stuff on the ethereal plane. I don't know, I just really enjoyed the creature. They don't exist in 5th edition, especially since it seems like we're going possibly to a more plane shifty style things with some of the subclasses. Maybe these guys will make a comeback. Number 8. Number 8 is going to be the last time we're in the base monster manual for a while, and that is the Abyssal Greater Basilisk. So if you're familiar with basilisks in 5e, they kind of look like these weird toady, kind of galumphy 6 or 8-legged lizard type creatures. And I mean, obviously, if you've seen Harry Potter or know Harry Potter, it's a big snake in there. But I knew basilisks from this first, and this always I was like, oh, this is what we got in 5th edition, and they're scary, right? Because the petrifying gaze and everything, but they don't really evoke a ton of fear in my mind. They're kind of just like a big stony lizard, and just kind of like, I feel like they should be slow too, even though they have so many legs, they just kind of look slow. But the greater Abyssal Greater Basilisk looks like this, and this thing is a creature made of nightmares, and it's got these long quills and this creepy weird face. And to give you some perspective, the base Basilisk in 3.5 was a challenge rating 5. The Abyssal Greater was a challenge rating 12. The Petrifying Gaze on the regular one was a 13. On the Abyssal Greater, it was a 21, so a big disparity there. And then you could just see right here that a ton, almost triple, actually maybe even more than triple the HP. Its damage went up to 2d8 plus 10 on its bite attack. It also had the ability Smite Good, which there was a lot of things that were dealing with chaos and law and good and evil. But once per day, it could just choose to deal an extra 18 points of damage against a good foe. And then it also had a ton of other things, right? It had resistance to cold and fire, damage reduction, spell resistance. Again, I'm not going to belabor what all of these things are because they're not really relevant in 5th edition. And then it had a ton of feats. Look at all these: alertness, lightning reflexes, blind fight, great fortitude, a ton of stuff to make it super strong and survivable. And again, it could just tack on the damage if it wanted to a good creature that it was fighting. Its weapons were considered magic for overcoming damage resistance. Yeah. It says they would travel around the abyss. Servants of demon lords make good use of those as guards and escorts. I don't know. I just think it would be also something that could definitely, I feel like if you put the Basilisk in the 5e monster manual, why not put the Abyssal Greater option in there as well? Other than the fact that they don't seem to want to give us too many high-level monsters, because they don't seem to really be balancing 5th edition grand scheme-wise for, 10 plus. There's significantly less monsters in that range, and I think that's because they're focused more on 5th edition being a good entry point to D&D, and it's more levels 1 to 10. Number 7. Number 7 is a Lifeleech Otyugh. So I like Otyughs as a general rule. I don't know why. I just seem to really enjoy running those in games. And the Lifeleech one is terrifying if you're unaware. So it has all the benefits. I'll read you a little bit here. This creature looks like a bloated ovoid supported by 3 stocky legs. A vine-like eye stalk rises about 2 feet above its bloated body, and 4 thick tentacles extend from its sides. The creature's horrid mouth extends around the entire front half of its body and holds multiple rows of jagged teeth. The creature's rough hide twists and contorts over its strange form, seemingly infused with a horrid energy of its own. So this particular version here had, I don't remember if the original Otyugh had fast healing, but this one does. It has a significantly boosted AC by its spell strength hide. And the key thing, right, in the name is the Lifeleech aura. So whenever a spell or any kind of healing went off within 60 feet of it, it gains the benefit of the healing spell as if it had been one of the targets. So that meant, like, if you were doing like a mass cure wounds, it would get the benefit of that. But if you were doing some other higher level thing, like say maybe a heal spell, it would also benefit from the heal spell. And if it would grant it hit points above and beyond its maximum hit points, it gained those as temporary hit points, which it could have a maximum of up to its maximum hit points in temporary hit points as well. So you healing your party actually is a huge detriment to fighting this thing, which is nasty because it could do some serious damage to you. And then it's also already healing, and then when you try to heal your party members, it gets healed as well. Also, something else I thought was interesting is the later books also gave you a little blurb about what they were like in Eberron, if in case you were going to play them in an Eberron campaign. Just nice stuff we used to get back in the day. Sorry, I should have stated that was in the Monster Manual 3. Number 6. For number 6, we head to Monster Manual 2, and that is the Greenvise. I do think there's not a ton of really good plant-based creatures in 5th edition. There's very few. And the Greenvise, aside from the obvious little Shop of Horrors reference or the animated Venus flytrap, is a really powerful and interesting creature, and I think it could be a good fit for 5e. So this is a pretty nasty challenge rating 10 creature. This I think was actually a 3.0 creature, not a 3.5, because I don't think the Monster Manual 2 was made in 3.5 for whatever reason. But yeah, you can see this is a huge plant creature. It had this Death Fog ability, which it would basically do the Acid Fog spell with this big radius, and then listen to all the nastiness that happened if you were in that. And you could do that twice a day. Dark Vision, all sight, including Dark Vision, was limited to 5 feet. You could barely basically see in front of you. People would have concealment. Attempting to move through it, you moved at 1/10 your normal movement speed, and your melee attacks and melee damage rolls had a -2 penalty. It prevents effective ranged attacks, but this is like my favorite, the language we used to have back in 3.0 and 3.5. A Death Fog prevents effective ranged weapon attacks, except for magic rays and the like. In addition, you also took 3d8 points of acid damage with no saving throw. And you could disperse it, and it lasted for 3d6 plus 1 rounds. So that's pretty nasty. And that was a 40-foot radius. 40-foot high, 60-foot radius fog. So that was pretty rough. It also had improved grab, which made it better at grabbing folks. It had swallow whole ability. It had all the abilities of a plant that 3.5 had, which meant it was immune to poison, sleep, paralysis, stunning, and polymorph. It was also immune to critical hits. And it had wood sense. It can automatically sense the location of anything within 60 feet that is in contact with vegetation, even if objects or creatures that are not in contact with the same vegetation as it. So just a really nasty plant creature. I think this would be great in 5e, and I may actually homebrew it for a future game. So, Number 5. Number 5 is a Snowflake Ooze, and it's basically what it sounds like. It's an ooze, but it looks like a snowbank. So I'll read you the text here. What at first appeared to just be a bank of snow is in fact a lacy, delicate-looking creature resembling an enormous snowflake with a complex structure. This is a challenge rating 5 creature. You can see this poor adventurer is getting devoured by it. But obviously it had all of its standard kind of ooze-based abilities. Blind sight, immunity to cold. It had all ooze traits, which is something I used to be able to do back in 3.5. Just call it like ooze traits. So you'd have to reference in the monster manual what things all oozes had, so it could kind of limit the space things took up. And you say, oh, all oozes have access to this. All undead have access to this. And that was kind of thing that I liked because you could just apply traits to things. That was an easy way for homebrewing. But anyway, back to this. It is vulnerable to fire. And it had the airy kind of a feature here. Since a snowflake's ooze physiology is made up of a little ooze and a lot of empty space, it is difficult to know where to attack. It had a 20% miss chance. This would basically be all attacks against it have disadvantage in 5e. And then that was even if you had like true seeing or the ability to see through kind of illusions and stuff, you still have suffered that. It exudes cold. Any creature within 5 feet of it takes a d6 points of cold damage. They can make a save though for half. And split it, bludgeoning weapons deal no damage to it. Instead, the creature fractures into 2 identical snowflake oozes, each with half of the original creature's hit points. A Snowflake Ooze with 10 hit points or less cannot be further split and dies if reduced to 0. And then it could climb. And then again, here we have 2 blocks in this one. Snowflake Oozes in Eberron, and then Snowflake Oozes in Faerun, because they used to give you that kind of a breakdown in case you were playing in different campaign settings. And like its initial slam attack also did, additional cold damage on top. Very cool. Number 4. Number 4 is more Drake types. We currently have basically ambush drakes and guard drakes in 5th edition. And basically, they're sort of like a dog, in 5th edition. They're like a lizard-style dog creature. But drakes were different in 3.5, as you can see here. Some of these have wings. And then we have some variants like a black guard drake and a green guard drake and other kinds of drakes based on dragon colors. But these drakes we had elemental based, right? Fire, air, ice, and earth. But then they also had funky other drake types here like magma drake, water drake, smoke drake, and an ooze drake. And I just really like this. Oh, by the way, this is in the Draconomicon, a book that was entirely dedicated to only dragons and dragon-based things, because I feel like back in the day, Wizards of the Coast knew what people wanted, and they gave them dragons. So I don't really have any specific stat block here that I want to go over. Each one kind of had its own unique things. And I don't think they had just like a Drake section. Yeah, these were elemental drakes, I'm sorry. Because there were ambush drakes and guard drakes contained in the other ones as well. Fierce creatures distantly related to wyverns, but with a heritage that derives from the elemental planes. They resemble lithe, sinuous dragons with scale coloration and texture appropriate to their elemental legacy. Most measure about 12 feet from nose to tail. Some Jan breed and train. I don't know what that means, but some Jan breed and train elemental drakes as steeds. And then you can see all the different ones. They had different abilities. And again, like if you looked at the Ooze Drake, it was good at grappling people and it had acid. The Smoke Drake had a breath weapon, all that kind of stuff. I really liked the concept of all these different weird options. Like you had a Fire Drake, but you also had a Magma Drake and a Smoke Drake. And I'm sure there was probably other drakes in other books as well, but this is the main source that I know of them. Number 3. For number 3, we're going back to Monster Manual number 3, and that is the Siege Crab. If you know anything about me, you know that I love crabs. Kingler is my favorite Pokemon. I have a whole town in my homebrew world based around crabs and crab riders and crab armor, and also crab's one of my favorite foods to eat. So the fact that there was a creature created called the Siege Crab was just a go-to pick for me, and something I never got a chance to ever run in a 3.5 game, though I do have a lot of Kuo-toa influence in my homebrew campaign, so this may be making a comeback. So this massive crab-like creature has 4 large pincers and 6 segmented legs. Its bright blue shell is covered with strange glowing runes, and a round hatch is visible on the crustacean's underbelly. So this is a crustacean creature, but is basically warped and changed into a war machine. And it is a gargantuan-sized creature. It has constrict and improve grab, and it can trample people. But the big kind of thing here is the force carapace. So it has runes sketched into it to give it a plus 10 to its AC, plus 8 to all of its saving throws, immunity to magic missile spells and effects. All creatures within the crab gain benefits of this. Incorporeal creatures can't attack inside it, nor can such creatures pass through the shell. Its claws are considered force effects for striking, so it could attack ghosts with no problem. And incorporeal creatures, it's basically a magic item. They give you the breakdown of how to create that if you wanted to make it. And then inside is the shielded compartment. Most of the interior tissue of the crab has been surgically removed and replaced with a sealed compartment for passengers or cargo. It's accessed by a ventral hatch and is air and water tight. You can fill it with water if you're a water-breathing creature, or air if you're an air-breathing creature. Passenger space is about 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet. You can hold 1 large creature or 4 small or medium creatures. They have complete total cover and total concealment from all external attacks. Opening the hatch is an action. If it dies, it doesn't compromise the cover that it provides. It's just its stomach collapses, so it's harder to escape. You'll have to break through the carapace to get out. And here's its stat block right at 190 HP, a 37 armor class. Its claws did 2d6 plus 10 damage. You could do 4 attacks and a full attack. It had a constrict. Its trample did 2d6 plus 15. It had damage resistant reduction 15 adamantine. And then obviously vermin traits, because all kind of bugs and crabs and things were considered vermin in back in 3.5. And then there was also a greater siege crab version, which went from gargantuan to colossal, which jumped it up to 432 HP, 38 AC. Its attacks did even more damage. It's just crazy to think about it. Like the strength of the base crab was a 30. The greater crab had a strength of 38, and it had cleave, great cleave, power attack. Then they showcase down here the coral circlet is a simple headpiece that allows the wearer to control a single specific siege crab. The wearer can give the crustacean commands whenever the crab is within 120 feet, which the crab carries out to the best of its ability. By closing their eyes, they can see through the crab's eye stalks, allowing them a clear view of the battlefield, even if the wearer is entirely enclosed within the crab's hollow abdomen. The wearer of the circlet is located within the siege crab's shield compartment. Any spell he or she casts can be targeted as if the spell is originating from the crab itself. For example, a wizard within the compartment could cast a meteor swarm that originated from the crab's claw rather than the caster's own hand. This does not require an action on the crab's part. And then a section on siege crabs in Eberron and siege crabs in Faerun. If that's not the coolest piece of mobile warfare technology, I don't know what is. Number 2. For number 2, we're heading back to the Draconomicon, and this is kind of a broad spectrum one, but this is expanded dragon types. Obviously, everybody wants gem dragons, so that would be one, but there are a lot of other dragons aside from just gem dragons that were contained in this book. For example, you have your fang dragons right here. If we were to scroll down, we have shadow dragons, we have skeletal dragons, we have vampiric dragons. We know we've seen kind of Dracoliches, but this is a zombie dragon. We had our vampiric dragon. There's a vampiric red dragon. And then there was also planar dragons, which I wanted to showcase, right? So here's a battle dragon. Here's a chaos dragon. What else is there? Ethereal dragon. Here's a howling dragon. An Oceanus dragon, a Pyroclastic dragon, a Radiant dragon, a Rust dragon, a Styx dragon, what is this, a Tartarian dragon, and then again we're into our Shadow dragon. But, like, look at all these different cool options for dragons. These ones were all tied to the different planes. So, right, I'm sure the Radiant dragon was probably Celestia-based. Or some sort of good plane. And that would just be so cool to have all. I mean, everybody loves dragons, right? It's in the name of the game. More dragon types outside of just the metallics and the chromatics would be awesome, right? We have fairy dragons, right? But they're not technically a dragon. But give us the gem dragons, give us the brown dragons, the fang dragons, the deep dragons, all these other kinds of dragons that we know exist. Everybody wants them. I mean, maybe if I'm lucky, fingers crossed, one of the biggest books I would love to have, as I've stated before, is a 5th edition Draconomicon, just a dragon resource book. Draconomicon sounds like a book you could find in the world, so they don't have to come up with some funky name for it. And I think it would sell like crazy, and I think they're really stupid if they don't make it. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Number 1. And for me, the number 1 monster, or in this case kind of a type, that I would like to see brought into 5th edition would be dire animals. And I know we technically have dire wolves, but I feel like they kind of made it in as a type of wolf because of the popularity of Game of Thrones. But dire animal used to be a type. It just represented, as it states right here, a larger, tougher, meaner versions of ordinary animals. Each kind tends to have a feral, prehistoric, or even demonic appearance. For example, the quintessential dire bear, right? Like, look at that. There's an elf, maybe a ranger there to give you a frame of reference. That is a dire bear. This thing is massive. It is nasty. This is a challenge rating 7 creature. I've seen it homebrewed a ton of times. I've done it myself. I would love to have this, right? Not only do dire animals benefit druids who want to wild shape into them, they can work for summons, they can work for interesting NPCs, all sorts of cool stuff. So we can see here the base monster manual gave us a dire ape, dire badger, dire bat, dire bear, dire boar, dire lion, dire rat, and dire shark, dire tiger, obviously the dire wolf, dire weasel, and a dire wolverine. But that wasn't even it. They expanded upon it. If we look over here in the monster manual too, here's a dire hawk right here. Some of these don't have a ton of, like, they have just very, like, here's a stat block, but very minimal changes. Dire toad, dire snake, there's a dire horse, dire elk, dire elephant, and so on. So I just feel like it expands. Beasts, I think, are one of the worst represented monster types in 5th edition. And, like, there are a lot of things that use beast types, whether it be a beast master, someone summoning animals, although I guess the spirits are technically chosen by the DM, so conjure animals isn't necessarily the case with that. But, I mean, druids who are in a wild shape, more wild shape options is always good. And obviously, if you're a moon druid, that's even more important because you want to have more options of more things you can turn into. And again, people wanted. I have seen probably, no joke, at least 15 dire bear homebrews in different modules on the DM's Guild and stuff because people clearly want it. I think I've even seen, like, dire compendiums that are basically books of people creating dire versions of existing animals. Because, again, it's a thing people want. So, let me know what you all think in the comments down below. This one actually looked like it might have been one of my shorter videos. Mostly because a lot of these creatures, I didn't have too many specific things to say. I want them in 5th edition. And, again, like, some of them seem like a no-brainer, right? Like, more dragons. How can you not do more dragons? I don't know. So... let me know, again, what you all think in the comments down below. If you liked this video or all the recent top 10 video topics, you can shout out to my patrons, which I'm going to do right now over on Patreon. They vote every week what my top 10 videos should be. There were about 5 or 6 options, and this was the clear winner by at least double the amount of votes of any other video. So any level patron can vote on this. Higher levels get to help decide what goes onto the poll to vote for. But yeah, this was what they voted for. So we'll see what comes up next week. Also, it seems like a lot of you are really digging me going back and looking at old D&D stuff to try to bring it into 5th edition. And I've received an overwhelming amount of people telling me I want you to do a series where you just update stuff from 3.5 to 5e, and that sounds like a lot, so we'll see. I'm already adding in this new build series to my videos, and people have also been asking for, like, D&D stories, like me doing campaign discussions. And I think, like, when I think of D&D stories, I immediately think of someone like Puffin Forest, who tells a story of what, like, a funny anecdote or something that happened in a game session that he either played in or ran. But he's an animation channel, so he animates it, and that's funny, and that works. If it's me just telling you something that happened, I don't know, like, if people just want to hear me talk about it, or, like, me try to do some weird thing where I, like, put images on the screen, like a slideshow, but that doesn't really fit my style, and it's not going to be relevant exactly. I'm going to be hunting down pictures to be relevant to a given story. I don't know. Also, most of my 5th edition gameplay all exists on YouTube. It's all on the channel. I've recorded every bit of it. There's a lot to sift through, I understand. So if you're curious and interested in maybe me doing that, I don't know, let me know in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you made it all the way to the end, I really do appreciate it because that does help the YouTuber out when you stay to the end of the video. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.